Well, then we are going to begin. This is a side event to discuss. The title exactly is the pros and cons of developed aquifers, hydrological, economic, social, and ethical issues. It's preparatory meeting for an international research project. So this is a preparatory meeting for that. Then the people do receive with the organization of here Zaragoza an agenda. We have to include a new person in the agenda. This Dr. Shat Altokais comes from Saudi Arabia. All of you know that is a very interesting country for this. Then, in principle, estaba 5 minutes to make the presentation of the people are here. Well, I think really the mind or the brain of this meeting is Emilio, que está aquí, but Emilio has been with a flu the last years. He asked me to act more in this meeting. Then I think the presentation of the people here is, well, to my left is Professor Custodio, all of you know him. Then let us go, Jorge, introduce yourself very quickly.
Okay, my name is Jorge Molinero and I work in a consultant company. Okay, my name is Jorge Molinero. I work in a consultancy company named Amphos21. We work internationally and especially in water and environmental issues worldwide. So this intensively developed aquifers is one of the things we used to work with.
Good evening. My name is José Luis García Arostegui. I'm working in Geological Survey of Spain. That depend of the Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Ali At-Tukhays. I am mainly geologist, then hydrogeologist. I worked for the Ministry of Agriculture and Water in Saudi Arabia and with the Ministry of Water when these two ministries were separated. The last position, I was a Deputy Minister for Water Affairs. 4 years ago, I have been moved from the Ministry of Water to Shura Council, which is equivalent to the Saudi Parliament, also dealing with water within the Parliament itself.
And then, would you like to present yourself and the people?
Musa Al-Gahtani from Saudi Arabia, from Agriculture Development Fund. I have a master's degree from economic agriculture.
Yeah, I'm Jose Albiac from Zaragoza, from a research center. I'm economist and I work on water management, mainly related to agriculture, non-point pollution and things like that.
I am Maite Aldaya. I work part-time for the Water Observatory and part-time for the United Nations Environment Programme.
My name is Juan Antonio López Geta. I'm working in Geological Surveys of Spain.
Okay. No, that's everybody has already. That's it. No, then we begin with the first presentation. This is my presentation. It will be maximum 10 minutes, even less. When 5 minutes, you tell me and I finish. Well, then, ¿puedo poner la primera? ¿Hablo desde allí o hablo desde aquí?
Porque si no volverás.
A ver si damos con la primera.
Se está abriendo aquí. Se está abriendo ya. Pero ahora lleva su tiempo. Sí.
Okay, very quickly. Well, this is the table of contents. Thank you very much. This is the table of contents. Then the origin of this. The aim of this presentation is to remember this is something that was written by the General Secretary of the International Association. Groundwater is still out of sight, but less out of mind. So water is becoming something important now for the global water policy. And then I took this, 14 years ago, there was in Paris a UNESCO conference called Water Looming Crisis, always looming, always this pessimistic approach. And then I remember I spoke in that meeting. This was afterwards was written in a book by Marc de Villiers. I see during more than 10 years, that was 12 or 14 years ago, I have tried without success to find reliable information on medium-sized aquifers, more than 500 square kilometers, where intensive use of groundwater development has been an economic and or social disaster. In the book by Marc de Villiers, the response, there were 200 people there, was stone silence. So nobody was telling that I was wrong. And then 14 years later, the situation, I would say, is the same. So that this is why we are trying to promote this. Then another anecdote that is quickly, it's already 8 years ago, there was a conference in Jordan, and some people in the question and answer, I told, I am not enthusiastic on the California water sources policy. The farmers' lobby is so powerful as the National Rifle Association that again, this year with Obama is again in the newspapers. And someone from the other said, they are the same, and everybody laughed. Well, this is the origin of then in the audience was the editor of the American Society of Civil Engineers Journal and asked me to write an editorial. It was a long editorial that was published years ago. And this is a graph that I have no time to explain, that has been reproduced in many papers, explaining the what we call the 5 stages about the groundwater development, intensive development, that is a recent situation all over the world. There is no time to explain that, but this paper has been reproduced in many cases. Then the 5 stages I distinguished was hydroschizophrenia, so it's the separation between surface and groundwater. Then the groundwater silent revolution, that is a fact. And then the formation of powerful farmers' lobbies asking for surface water transfer. This is a typical case of California. In Spain was because of the formation also powerful conservation lobbies in Spain was cut, and this was not a total transfer. And then there is a lot of social and political confrontations. That is a question that is still alive in Spain in many places. Well, very quickly, this is to remember what is the cause of this silent revolution and the technology, the new technology. And then let us go quickly to what we are trying to do, is to try to finish with a misconception about the groundwater intensive use, or more than, probably is more exact to say, the use of groundwater storage, the intensive use of groundwater storage is probably the key issue to describe it. And then our idea is this, as I mentioned, this is a preparation for a new research project led by Emilio Custodio. I am helper for him. And this trying to analyze 10, 12 case histories from different countries of the world, and then in each history make only to study the hydrological performance, hydrogeological performance. This is the easiest thing. It has been done in many cases. Economic benefits and cost. This has not been done in many cases. Then social changes required for that. And this, for instance, in that case for me was very clear, a paper presented by the professor from Saudi Arabia in a meeting we had 10 years ago, explaining why the intensive use of groundwater in Saudi Arabia, then making an explanation very useful. Environmental externalities, something to take into account. And then political issues, because water is a political issue in every area in semi-arid countries. And then we have to study, in each case, alternative future solution. I can tell also that this is a question that was dealt with in the COMEST. COMEST is the Commission, the World Commission for the Ethics of Science and Technology. And there's a paper about this, about the use of groundwater. And this paper is really, well, this paper is a statement of this International Commission that is very clear about that using the groundwater storage is not always a bad thing. It could be to study in case, but this is going to be the study. The study, what we want to do is to take, as I mentioned previously, 10, 12 case histories going from the Ogallala Aquifer in Texas, to mention a developed country, to Gujarat in India, that is another example, and then we can go to Libya, to New Mexico, to, well, there are almost in every arid and semi-arid country, this is a situation. In Spain, there are many, a good number of examples, Canary Islands, the Crevillente Aquifer, and there is a good number of them, with places where Pampage is today at 400 meters deep. From the beginning, it was at the surface. And I think this is all I wanted to tell. What we are trying to do is to, well, this is to explain about the conclusion is intensive has produced stupendous and social economic benefits in Saudi Arabia, in Texas, in Spain, but has also created some problems, mainly ecological, due to scarce planning and control by the government agencies. The usual current anarchy of groundwater management and governance demands a greater participation of the users, mainly farmers, by means of Groundwater Users Association. Elena Lopez-Gun is working very hard in that. And this is, well, urgent to assess the different types and performance of such associations. I think that's all I wanted to do. And then it's your time, Emilio. You want to come here?
Mr. Chairman, I suggest that since I finish with the proposal, to present first the examples, and then I give the more general view at the end, if you like.
No, but you like.
You are the chairman.
No.
You decide.
No, you decide. Okay. Then what next?
It's up to you.
Well, then Jorge, and you are the final speaker, Emilio.
Okay.
I am going to go to in front to see.
I think it's better.
Okay. So thank you very much to Emilio and Ramon for inviting me to this meeting. As I told you, I am very much interested in this project or research initiative because, well, basically I have been working in hydrogeology for almost 20 years. But during the last years, I am in the private sector, in the consultancy. So we are working worldwide, but especially, well, I mean, not especially, but we are really working in South America and in Africa. And, Well, I would concentrate a little bit about the Andean zone and Saharan zone. And I have not real details in this presentation, but if anybody of you want to make a question, I would be happy. It's just a general overview. I have prepared this presentation. I want to be really to the point in the problematic, in one of the problems I have seen, which is not the unique one, probably. Of course, it's not the unique one, but is a common problem in two of the most arid, if not the most arid areas in the world, which are the Saharan zone and this Chilean, Bolivian, Peruvian area nearby Atacama region, but also in the other side of the frontier, especially in Bolivia. And why a company or a consultant company is working in the Saharan and in the Andean region? Basically because we have mining clients, or the contrary, we have clients which are the regulators or the authorities that controls mining industry. So we are working basically in hydrogeological and hydrogeochemical issues related especially with mining, both for water supply or water supply to the mining operation, or for environmental litigations or accidents or whatever. So then I would mix, because the problematic is very much the same. Basically, we have a hyper-arid region, or arid in some places, really, really arid in some others, with a lot of water, a lot of groundwater reserves in general, in both sides. I mean, huge amounts of water. But definitely, when there is a conflict on the water use, the standard ideas or paradigms or sometimes absolute rights that we use in water management would not apply in this context. When we speak about sustainability, water renewal, and things like that, well, this makes no sense, and many, many times it is even completely misleading concept when you really want to make practical solutions in these areas. This is an example that Professor Emilio Custodio knows very well, because it corresponds to a recent project we have done for a client in Chile, and Professor Emilio was an external advisor and reviewer of our work here. And basically, this is a picture you can originally in this paper, and then also cited in this other one. And this is an example on how to propagate errors a long time when you cite and cite and cite more times and copy and paste some figures. You know, this is a typical cross section from the from the Pacific coast to the Andes Cordillera. So this is the coastal ridge, or Cordillera de la Costa. Here you can have a city like Iquique with 500,000 people living there or something like that, that needs, of course, water supply. This is a Pampa del Tamarugal, which is a valley with no rain, zero, absolute zero rain. I mean, no rain at all here. Basically because the fronts coming to here comes from the other side, which is the Atlantic side, and you have all the rain in the selvatic or in the Amazonian or areas, and then you have some remaining rain here. You can have like 100 millimeters, 200 millimeters of rain over here in the Andes. Then you have all these altiplanic basins, usually endorheic, and then you have here with no rain. And of course, this is a kind of conceptual model of hydrogeology, and well, somebody decided to plot these arrows. And just to plot these arrows has tremendous consequences, because the mining companies are operating here. So there is somebody that must decide if this mining company has the right to extract some water for the process. And then, of course, if you look at this picture, the rational decision could be, no, not at all, because we have people living here, and there is no rain here. so you cannot take the water here. But of course there is not real scientific proof of water coming from here to here, and not any scientific proof of the contrary. So then, according to our current understanding, we really believe the issue is more or less like this, that you have basically rain here, and some of the waters circulates here in these areas, and some others here. This is more or less the age of the groundwater according to carbon-14. So it's about 10,000 years of the water here, about half of this age of the water here. This water age, is a concept that must be taken with care. It's a renewal time or whatever you want to call of the water. Yeah, residence times or whatever. Okay? But, here there is a mining activity, and here you have drinking water supply, and every time more and more agriculture. Because, for instance, in this country, in Chile, usually all the agriculture used to be in the south with a lot of rain, but every time more and more they know that there is groundwater here that you can develop, and the agricultural activity is increasing because the weather here is exceptional. So you can have 2 or 3 crops per year, and high value agriculture. So that is the situation right now. And right now there are low-level conflicts in the papers, not real conflicts, but of course there is a debate. And in this kind of debate, if you have a mining company here, it is always very easy, because these people, the capitalists, and they win a lot of money, and they are very bad, and blah, blah, blah. So then you have a lot of populistic message in the mass media, and blah, blah. So it's an interesting case study for this project, I think. On the other hand, we have the Saharian zone, which is hyper-arid or even more than that. In this particular part, which is the boundary between Mauritania, Algeria, and Mali, is almost no rain, maybe one event of rain every 3 or 4 years. And then what you have is that it has been a lot of cooperation activities, NGOs and international aid going on there, and also governments investing there. So basically this is a land with traditional people living as nomads, but then of course it's very easy to make boreholes. You get water for sure, usually high productivity, a lot of water. Then it's relatively easy to in place a water drinking, modern water supply system. That means that in places that traditionally was nobody living in a permanent basis, now you have like 80,000 people living, 100,000 people living. And of course, you also have agricultural activity. And then they grow tomatoes and some fruits and so on. And they put the camels, and they grow more also animals. So this is also going on right now, and I have seen that at least in this part of the Western Sahara border with Algeria, but also in Niger. Recently I was in this area in Niger. This is a uranium mine in Niger. In this particular area, relatively nearby, there is 3 uranium mines, and it's a 4th coming on. And this is one of the major uranium productions in the world. And in this particular area, 20 years ago, nobody was living. Now there is a city of 100,000 people because the mine activity. There's a lot of people working there, basically everybody, directly or indirectly. And then, of course, to extract the mineral, you need to pump out the water. You need to make the dewatering of that. And you also need the mineral processing. And this consumes some water. Basically, well, this is also just to see how does it looks in the Chilean, go back to Chile. This is the typical endorheic basin in the high Cordillera, and this is the Pampa. This is the place where I tell you there is no rain at all. And then you have occasionally some oases due to groundwater discharges like this. So basically concentrated along the faults or according to the geology. So looking at the at the mining, for instance, is that this is water consumption by the mining industry in Chile. Basically, well, it depends on the mineral and so on, but about 1 cubic meter per ton of mineral process. So an average mine in Chile, mine operation of copper, can have a annual production of about 500,000 of tons. If you assume that they will need twice this water because they need more water, not only for the processing, they need more water, this would be like about 1 cubic hectometer per year for every mine. So if you assume 10 millimeters of recharge, I am inventing, but why not? That would mean that you need an area of recharge only for that mine of 100 square kilometers if you apply the traditional concept of sustainability and you start to think in that way. And then people start to debate, is that sustainable? No, it's not sustainable because you are taking more water than the recharge. But, I mean, what do you mean? What do you really mean with that? I mean, do you know how much total amount of water you have there? Have you ever compute how many years have you with recharge without any extraction? It's not the same if you have a wet land associated to that or if not. If you have a wet land, then you have an environmental concern. If not, why do you care if the water is 10 meters or 30 meters? So then, I think there is a lot of things to do in methodologically speaking for management, but also pedagogically. I mean, there's also a message that is needed. So just to finish, we have extensive groundwater resources available in arid regions. We have growing population. At least my experience is that all the places I have been visiting in that context, all of them has every time more and more people. Obvious. I mean, this is extreme regions of the world. In natural conditions, nobody wants to live there. I mean, just some nomads or some locals, but very few people. But now, you are improving living conditions. You have internet connection by satellite in the refugees camps of the Western Sahara. Everybody can connect that. You have air condition. So, you have improving living conditions, so more and more people is getting there. Increasing agriculture, because there is groundwater. So if you get groundwater and good weather, it's obvious. But in some of these areas, but in many of them I would say, basically because they are remote and nobody has exploited that before, there is a boom of mining activity because the steady increase of the metals price, because there is a huge demand of the emerging economy. So as long as China, India, and Brazil needs to get cables for electricity that they don't have now, you can expect in the next years that this demand would be high, so this would be probably increasing also. And I have seen that you have some low-level conflicts between the different users, especially driven by this mining industry, because they have very bad reputation, probably because they deserve. In the past, they do it very badly in some areas. So, just to finish, a need of water management models or doctrines specific for these areas is obvious, because traditional or even modern water management paradigms, not traditional, I mean, what we call here the new paradigms and so on, I mean, they doesn't apply there. It's not valid. So this is a colleague of mine measuring a piezometer. So I just put this, I like this picture. It has nothing to do with any conflict. This is all tanks of a military camp for training in Chile. But it was nice that they was just in the middle of the piezometer, so they decided to put the piezometer there. It's very well located. And that's it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. here. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Okay. I very much appreciate the invitation from Professor, the invitation to participate in this event from Professor Llamas and Custodio. Thank you very much. Just in a few minutes, I would like to draw your attention about the highly intensive use of groundwater in the southeastern Spain, and particularly in the Segura Basin, one of the river basin districts in Spain. This area includes a small but highly productive aquifers, and it was a pioneer area in all the, at least at national level, in the intensive use of groundwater. I'm going to show a regional point of view of a global problem, since the strategies to combat the groundwater depletion are only possible at regional scale, according to the scale of aquifer. Groundwater depletion occurs in many parts of the world, and also in the south of Europe, as you can see in this slide. In this case, in the south of Europe, the phenomenon is largely located in Italy, in Bulgaria, and also in the southeastern Spain. But I don't want to overlap this with the presentation of Professor Custodio. Groundwater depletion is probably the main environmental problem of the Segura Basin. Currently, the estimated groundwater deficit is about 0.35 cubic kilometer per year. We suppose a total depletion that more than 12 cubic kilometer since 1965. It's probably a third of the national total, with this basin only account for the 4% of the surface of Spain. This area constitutes an excellent laboratory for observing many of the impact, the negative and positive impact, not only from a hydrological point of view or hydrological point of view. However, despite the importance of the groundwater contributing in the area between 40 to 60% of the water irrigation demand, it's obvious that the investment in knowledge, control, and evaluation remain very reduced. I like this. In the past, with the system was in a natural regime, perhaps there was another idea of the environment. Shall we create something to disregard the intermediary? In the area, yes, many pumping wells were dry-let, and there is, in several aquifers, there are more than one well per square kilometer. Close to the 70% of the groundwater body are in poor status and will not reach the objective of the Water Framework Directive, even considering the two stations provided. It's important to note that the groundwater right for irrigation entity is very much higher than the renewable resources. So there is a legal overexploitation in the area also. An interesting case is this one. This one is a small fissured aquifer associated to the Campo de Cartagena, Campo Cartagena is one of the major aquifers in the Mediterranean basin at international scale. And here, the groundwater, the rate of groundwater drawdown is about 10 meters per year. So currently, the groundwater level at more or less 500 meters. So the groundwater level elevation is about 400 meters below sea level. So it's certainly a record at European scale. And I only know so low groundwater level near to the Dead Sea, for topographical reasons. I don't know if there is in another place in the world. One more example is the Ascoya-Sopalmo aquifer. Here, the research of the aquifer is more or less 2 million cubic meters per year, but on the contrary, the extraction is 20 times higher. It's more or less 50 million cubic per meter a year, with a total depletion of 1.8 cubic kilometer. Despite the great deep at which the groundwater is located, the cost of pumping groundwaters do not exceed of 15% of the total agricultural cost. So, in my opinion, the cost of pumping groundwater is not a limiting factor for the profitability of the area. So here, the value, the average net margin for the free crops is about 8,000 euro per hectare per year. In this case, and in other 3 cases in the Altiplano, in the zone of Altiplano in Murcia, we are developing a new method for integrated water resource management of overexploited system, using in this case the method of object-oriented Bayesian network. This is an example of the result for different scenarios. Basically, the general idea is to quantify the relation between variables, taking into account the uncertainty. This probabilistic method, this probabilistic decision support system, make it possible to simulate different scenarios like hydrology, hydrogeology, legal aspects, political aspects, and so on. And in all the phases for the construction of the Bayesian network has been taken into account the stakeholders. An example of the result that we have obtained is here for each one of the scenario, the different scenario, and for the 4 aquifer considered, and it's the agricultural net profit or the number of agricultural employment, taking into account, for example, the water balance equilibrium that I'm going to show here. In this table, this is the cost effectiveness analysis with this method. The scenario more restrictive, the water balance equilibrium, give us that the total cost for the implementation of this scenario, we are considered the 2 sub-scenario, with external irrigation water resource income, the total cost is 35 million euro per year. With the with the purchase of water rights, we need 120 million euro per year. So this case shows that in case like this, it's very difficult to apply the European directive. The last case that I would like to show is the Alto Guadalentín aquifer. It was officially declared overexploited more than 30 years ago. The total depletion is 1.6 cubic kilometer. This aquifer has been known recently, very recently at international level by a publication in Nature Geoscience where the author suggests that the location and magnitude of the Lorca earthquake was influenced by anthropogenic groundwater extraction. The social and maybe economic impact of this publication has been very important. As you can see through this headline. In BBC, in Le Monde, une étude liée au séisme et l'exploitation des nappes d'eau souterraines, also here in Spain. On this matter, I only would like to say that more knowledge is needed to say that. And finally, not all the impact has been negative in the area. We need to balance the positive and negative impact and then decide the long-term water management scenario. Through cooperation, this area, I think that it's a good example for implementation of a project about the subject that we can develop. Okay, and many thanks for your attention. It's a pleasure. Okay. One thing.
Where is
this one? Your representation is what? Okay. It's in Arab.
So,
yeah.
This one.
Well, 4 weeks ago, we had a meeting in the Water Observatory to discuss this problem of the earthquake and groundwater. Well, the conclusion of the people, that of 4 professors, that there is no connection without that. This is very thing. Even the paper in the science, nature science, geoscience, has been overemphasized in the newspapers. So the main reason contributed by one of the speakers that was there are registrations of earthquakes in this area from 2 centuries to 3 centuries. And there is no difference between the earthquakes before and after. And the groundwater development began only 40, 50 years ago. So if the earthquakes were the same in the 8th century and the 19th century, that now probably the connection between both things is very is questionable. So probably this is only for the press, but the enemies of groundwater development are likely to do that.
Well, I would like to thank Professor Ramon and Professor Custodio for inviting me to share ideas and opinions with, in this very important event. Also, I would like to thank the organizer of this really very important event. I am not well prepared for this presentation because I decided to come lately so you can recognize the title is in Arabic and it was devoted to University of Al-Baha in Saudi Arabia. The title is Non-Renewable Groundwater Management in Saudi Arabia. You see the rig here. It is not for the fancy of the rig. The rig, I brought it here because we drill more than 2,000 meters in Riyadh city to get potable water from groundwater. More than 2,000 meters down the ground to get drinking water purposes. This table shows us the water consumption of Saudi Arabia from 2005 until 2010 on the domestic sector, industrial sector, and agricultural sector. We see agricultural sector has the most share of that. The domestic water comes, 55% of the domestic water comes from desalinated seawater, and 45% comes from groundwater. This is a background about studies, explorations, and etc. in Saudi Arabia. We don't want to go. This is a geological map of Saudi Arabia. We have actually Saudi Arabia occupies about 2.2 million square kilometers. The average rainfall is about 50 millimeter per year. The average rainfall is about 50 millimeter per year. If we exclude this area, we call it the empty quarter. This is a sea of sand dunes. If we excluded it, there is no cities, there is no life in this area. It is the place where we have most of our oil reserves or oil. When we exclude that, the average rainfall will be about 100 millimeter per year. We have about 18 aquifers. 9 of them are principal, huge aquifers. If we see Sag aquifer, which is extend to Jordan, and they call it DC aquifer, it occupies about 45,000 square kilometers, and with about 1,200 kilometers parallel to the Arabian rocks, Arabian Shield area. This is the geology of Saudi Arabia. This is the Arabian Shield area, which is igneous and metamorphic rocks, mostly volcanic, and this is also volcanic rocks, Harrat, we call it Harrat, and this is a coastal plain along the Red Sea, which is in the southern part has a very good potential. This is a sedimentary succession starting from Cambrian in age to recent. This is a cross section from west to east. This is the Riyadh. This is in central Saudi Arabia. This is the Arabian Gulf area. We have a succession of anticlines, synclines, and etc. Subsurface structure has a role in that. This is precipitation. This is you see in most of the country is within less than 100 millimeter. In this area, this is southwestern part. It is the promising area if we have more encouragement and more programs to enhance The rainfall might sometimes reach 500 millimeter per year. It is a mountains extending from, I mean, including Yemen here, Yemen in this area. This is extension to along the Red Sea. This area has a very good potential for surface water. We have so many surface dams constructed in this area to catch the runoff. Here we have a hydrological provinces in Saudi Arabia. We don't want to spend much time. This is the hydrological northern Arabian Shield area. This depends mainly on renewable groundwater, the renewable water, which depends on rainfall. This is southern part also of the Arabian Shield. This is the same, sharing the phenomena of depending on rainwater. These are the Arabian platform where we have sedimentary formations, aquifers, etc. This is one example of the principal aquifers here. Lithology log we have in this log this is a very important aquifer, we call it Muraduma. This is another important aquifer. We have very effective drinking water projects in this area. In this aquifer, we are supplying the capital of Saudi Arabia with 200,000 cubic meter per day from this aquifer. We call it Wasi aquifer. I made my master's degree on 1980 on that aquifer. The drawdown is within 15 to 20 meters from 1980 until now. It is very good aquifer. The agricultural area is far away from such aquifer. In this aquifer also we supply Riyadh city with 350,000 cubic meter of groundwater from this aquifer. These are limestone aquifers. This is sandstone aquifers. These are the oldest ones. We have two types of aquifers, sandstone aquifers and limestone aquifers. Here are objectives of now the Ministry of Water is reassessing the water resources, and they are conducting several groundwater studies to know up to date the situation of each. This is just to show how we conduct our groundwater studies, starting from collecting data to developing aquifer models, then application of aquifers. This also showing how the process of evaluating the groundwater. This is the start of groundwater budget. We have precipitation. We have in the past we have springs, sabkhas, and we have the inflow groundwater recharge, and the outflow we have springs discharge, inland and coastal sabkha and Arabian Gulf. This is on 1965. This is before development. This is we call it a steady state condition. This is the present time. A lot of things changed. The springs already depleted. There is no more what they call recharge. We have these are the enemies of groundwater. This central pivots. We have huge agricultural farms, at least 30,000, 50,000 hectares for one farm. They have 200 wells, sometimes 300 wells in the same farm, tapping the non-renewable groundwater for getting alfalfa or wheat or cereal. This is on the balance. We have we are getting 12.5 billion cubic meter per year from storage. That means we are mining our groundwater. So the time has come to see how can we manage it, how can we prolong the life of these aquifers. The consequences of groundwater abstraction, we have declining groundwater levels. This is in all aquifers. We have large drawdowns. Sometimes, I mean, we reach up to 250 meters below ground level. We increasing in production cost. As the groundwater goes down, the cost of production will increase due to have more power, more pumps, destruction of the environment, and increasing desertification zones. This is true. We suffer it. The deterioration also of groundwater quality and saltwater intrusion in the coastal areas. There is a conflict between water users. This is our main problem, the conflict between water users, the agriculture, industry, domestic water users, and present generation and future generation. This is a formula how to deal with it, how to reach a solution that gets some of the benefits and help the future generations.